Hello guys. So today we'll learn to host a script without even having a server. So what does that mean? I mean, you could have a server and host all those things, but then there is a big problem. Suppose you want to host a Python script or maybe a PHP script, so you need to spin up a server, then you need to spin up your Apache softwares, and then you need to configure a lot of things, and on top of that you need to worry about a lot of security flaws, a lot of issues. Then you need to scale, and if you plan even to go to, let's say, multiple stages, maybe development stages, so you need to set up all those things again. That's a lot of pain, guys. That's a lot of pain. So in this tutorial I'll tell you how to host your script, maybe a PHP script, Python script, a Node script, whatever you want, in the Amazon cloud without even having a server. And there are a lot of facilities, there are a lot of possibilities you could do. For example, you can throttle your API, you can have your multiple stages running on, you could do a lot of stuff. So I've written a blog already. If you want to go ahead, it's on meshcookie.com. You could see the blog I've written. It's everything is explained and properly step by step given in this. So what we will be doing in this tutorial is we'll be having a Python script that will send an email using Amazon SES, which is again a Amazon supported service. It's called Simple Email Service, where you could send email easily. So in order to send email, we just have to configure our email address so that you can send emails and stuff. It's very simple. You just have to go to email addresses, and then you need to verify a new email address, and I can write my email address, let's say. So they have sent me a verification email. You could also skip this process and go back and see the rest of the tutorials, but it's require a little bit, so let me just do that quickly. I just have to verify this. So to say this, I'm verified already. So let me see if I am. So yes, it's verified. So what we'll do is we'll start with our Lambda function. It's already hosted on GitHub. You could see on my reports API Gateway Lambda send email. It's under lambda function.py. It's a basic Boto library, Boto client that actually initializes in this region, and then it start with few variables, sender, recipients, very simple, straightforward, and then it finally send the email. So let's get this code and host it on Amazon Lambda. So here is Lambda console. You could also get to the console by just typing console or Lambda here, and this is the thing that I'm working on. Just need to create this. So this is here. So let's create a function first. So you could also have get it started from a lot of blueprints. It's already hosted by them. There are a lot of blueprint that it's gonna help you a lot if you are not looking for something fancy and stuff. But for this tutorial, we'll go ahead and create from scratch. So let's call our function send email. Our function will be in Python 3.6. We have to create a role also, or we can create a choose an existing role, but which I have already created. It's called Lambda SES send email. So I have given permission to Lambda SES to this role so that I can send email using this. You could do it also, but I've done already just for the sake of this tutorial. We don't need this, so I'll close it, and then I'll hit create function. Just take a couple of seconds and you all have the entire Lambda function up and running. So there are a couple of things you need to see and understand how things work. So this is your Lambda. Send email is a Lambda function. It's already triggering your CloudWatch logs and SES. Okay, now what I could do is I could also configure a lot of things as a trigger. For example, I could do something on AWS IoT and it will hit on send email and could do a lot of stuff, right? So if you scroll a little bit down, this is Amazon's code editor, as in-browser code editor, where you could write your code. So there's something that you need to worry about is something like if you want to import some library or something, you cannot do this in this browser code editor because it's not that fancy. You just need to download this entire repo and you need to work it offline, then you could upload it back here. But if your code is fairly simple, like ours, we could do it directly in the browser. So I'll just paste the code that I used. All right, so this is the entire code. I'll explain the code a little later. For now, let's understand how this Lambda console can be configured, right? So this is done. There's one thing that we need to change, which is US East 1. I need to get the region code for Oregon. So let's find out. So it should have given me on the first page. So let's find out. We are in Oregon, which is US West 2. So you just need to copy this and paste in a console to activate this Python code. So it's fairly simple code. It's just the Boto library has been imported here. I have mentioned the reason, the character set. I have implemented the client. The client has been initialized here. So there is one thing that you need to understand about Python's version of Lambda, which is this function, Lambda Handler. So this function cannot change. This is the only handler function that is called by AWS Lambda. So you cannot rename the function. This is where you do stuff. You could do your variable initialization before that, but you need to get your things done here because this is the only function which will be called by Amazon. So there are two things, something called event and context. Event is something which actually as an object is given to you. For example, let's say in our case, if API gateway is hitting the Lambda, then the event object will have all those things that we send to API gateway. Then this is merely a try catch block which contains everything. So let's see, we have sender, which is basically who is sending the email. We have recipient, we have subject, we have body text, we have body HTML, we have CC. Also, we could also supply multiple email addresses. For example, I have just splitted this based on commas. So you could do that right as well. You could just comma separate your all the email recipient and you could add it here. Similarly, you could add CC function. This is fairly a client send email function where it take all the input and send the mail. It's very straightforward. You can see and get it. Let's just also see the JSON that this Python code will want in order to send email. I have also given this in description of the GitHub repo. So you just need to send this JSON, which is basically sender, recipient. As you can see, this is comma separated two emails. Subject, email, subject is there, body text is there, body HTML is there, and CC if you want. Again, you could also send a comma separated CC in this. So let's get back to Lambda function. I have this up and running. I could just save it. So as soon as I done saving, I have already a Python code that could send email. So now in order to test this email, I have to create a test event, or maybe I could create a new version out of it. So if I press test, it asks me to create a new test event. So let's say we create a normal test event with these data, which is here. I would just copy this data. This is just for sake of testing. If you want to test your code here, you could do this, not a problem. But we could also have API gateway proxy, just for test, nothing fancy. So just give it a name test. So as you can see, as soon as I select API proxy, it gave me the entire JSON. Obviously it is reconfigured. I could also paste my thing if I want to have my own event template, but this template is already provided by this. Okay, just a second. So if we were creating a test event, I just scrolled it back and I went to some other page. So let's do that a little again. So as soon as I select the proxy, this JSON is basically sent to our Python AWS Lambda Python code, which we need to understand. So when you're doing your code, you're writing your code, you need to understand how things are supplied to you as an event context, everything here. So all the headers are there, which is provided as a JSON into your code and everything. You could just dig it deep a little and you could find out everything. So let's create this. We just need to give it a name. Let's give it a name again. And we are done. So now we could easily check this, but when we test it, it won't work because we are sending some data which is not meant for this. That JSON that I showed you here, this is not coded in through that test event. So if we'll test it, it will definitely fail. Or maybe if it not fail, it does fail, yeah. So it will give you all those things, what error message. So it says parameter validation failed. That just because we don't have any validation. So now next process is triggering our API, our send email function. So how could we trigger this? So triggering is very easy. We need to create our own API gateway. Now I'll move to this tab for API gateway. Now what is API gateway? API gateway is sort of a Amazon service, Amazon platform as a service or cloud, where it makes all those REST functions available as an abstraction, where you could do anything with that. For example, let's say you abstract the API gateway layer with a post or a get function. Now what you want to do, what you want to get those post or get function to do is something you can configure anything. Lambda is one of them, but you can configure a lot of things. So let's configure Amazon API gateway. So you can obviously have an example API already here, but we'll also import from Swagger. For example, if you're using Swagger for documentation, you can import it from there as well. But for the sake of this tutorial, we'll create a new API. Let's call this API mesh cookie test. We could have a description. You can have a regional endpoint or edge optimize if you are looking for some performance, but I'll leave it regional and I'll hit create API. So this is done. So I'll explain this UI a little bit. You could see all the APIs are listed here. All the APIs are listed here. There's something called usage plan. API key is another thing. I'll explain it a little later. For now, let's just create action methods. For example, what are the methods? We have get, we have put, post, lead, patch, and whatnot. So in this tutorial, we'll create a post method. So I just select post and hit this button. So now I have a post API. Now what I want to do with this API is something I'll configure here. For example, if I want to configure it or integrate it with Lambda function, I'll do it here. If I want to integrate it with HTTP endpoint, I could do that. I could mock it like a normal HTTP service. I could configure any AWS service. This is very important. For example, this is just an abstraction. This entire API gateway is an abstraction. You could pass all the requests to anything. So this is fairly simple and very easy. You could also do with the VPC link. So let's get back to Lambda function. We created a Lambda function in US West 2. You remember the name of the function was send email. It already popped up here. I'll select and click save. Now this API is getting saved right now. But remember, this API is not deployed yet. This is just created. You need to deploy it in order to use it. So let's understand a cycle of this entire thing once. So if I click test, this is basically going to, a method of basically testing this, but we don't want to do that until we deploy it. Then this method request goes to this box, which is basically our first endpoint box. You could see the authorization none because we haven't set any authorization. We could obviously set token based authentication, stuff like that. Now this then goes to a second block, which is integration request, which is basically the Lambda box we configured. Lambda will then do the configuration or whatever execution it wants, and then it will get back the HTTP response to here and then finally to the client. So you could go ahead, dig deep, and you could also change a couple of things here. It's very simple. Now if I want to access this API, I just have to click and deploy the API. If I deploy, now deployment, as I said in the earlier description, that You could also have a deployment server. So this is where we decide the stage. For example, let's see if we have stage. Let's say call it production stage. We could have multiple stages. So you don't have to set up an entire server for your development. You just need to create the stages, and it's fairly simple. It's very easy. Now I'm going to deploy this to production stage. So as soon as this is deployed, I have a invoke URL, which is this one. So this is our API endpoint. We could just hit this API. If I just click this and open, it will give an authentication error about token. Yeah, missing authorization token, because this API is not meant to do a GET request, which we are doing right now. It is supposed to be accessed using POST. Now we could also access those using POST, but let's have another level of things to access the POST. But before that, let's look around in the UI. What we all have. We have logs. We could enable watch log, cloud watch logs, and stuff like that. We have stage variables. For example, if you want to have an API key for production stages and development stages is different, you could do that. You could also generate SDK. It's very important. For example, if you want to call this API from Android, just click Android, and whatever package ID generate SDK, it will generate that. It's very easy. If you want to just generate a JavaScript, just click generate SDK, and it will download all the SDK that is required for you to access this API. And yes, you can obviously export as Swagger. It will give you JSON, and you could import it in your Postman in order to see this. It also has a Postman extension. This is really extensive. They have done a lot of tasks in order to remove all those problems we used to face earlier. We could also see deployment history, which is like, this is the first one that we have deployed right now. Documentation something, and Canary if we're doing that way. So if we go and click this back, so this is the function we have. Now, before we hit our API, let's just try to understand what all things we have. We have resources, which is basically the post resource. We have stages that I mentioned already. We have a production. We could obviously go ahead and create a new stage. For example, let's say we call it a dev stage, and we could deploy to that as well. So we could have multiple stages in this. So this is fairly simple. We could go to authorizers. We could create authorizers. We have gateway responses. For example, what all type of responses our gateway will respond to. We could go ahead and select and change things if we want to. We have models. That is nothing regarding this. We have documentation. We could also write documentation. For example, if you go to resources, if you click post and click action, you could actually edit method documentation. You could create method documentation, which is going to be generated in that Swagger documentation stuff. So this is fairly simple. You could go to dashboard and see how many API calls. This is also this monitoring is really fun. For example, you could just select and change all the stages. You could obviously have a date filter and see how many API calls are being done, what is the latency they are facing, the 500 5xx errors, 400 and stuff like that. It's very good for monitoring. If you go to settings, we could also select if we are basically doing authorization, we could select where should the API key come from. Should it come from header? Should it come from authorizer and stuff like that? Now this entire thing is your API, but what is usage plans? You could also enable usage plan, and it's not plan because it's already been completed. Okay, I don't know. There's something wrong with this. Now I can also have a client domain names if I want to access it via some domain and stuff. Let's go to settings. There's something wrong with the UI of Amazon today. It's loading. Anyways, meanwhile, let's go and hit our API. So if I go to mesh cookie, my resources, which is this one, and stages, production stage. So this is our API. Let's copy this production stage API. So how to check it? So something you could download is Postman. Postman is really useful tool if you want to test your REST API. It come as entire standalone app. You could have a Chrome extension as well. It's really simple and very useful app if you want to use it. So I already have this app open. What I will do is I will just enter the URL here, which is my endpoint. I'll select the request as post. This is the body of the request. For example, this one is the body of request. Let's have my email address here, and else recipient should be, let's have it as myself. So I'm just saying multi-email stuff like that, and I could just, this is the request that response that came when I was testing the other API. So ignore that for right now. So now if I press send, it will then send the request to the API gateway. The API gateway then will forward those requests along with this JSON to our Lambda function. Lambda function will execute the function, will send the email and give me the response. So let's test this. So right now it's sending the request and says message failed, email address is not verified, because I might have write something. Oh, there was typo in the sender. So let's try that again. Email address is not verified. The following anki@gmail.com. Or maybe because of this, we don't need CC. Let's try that again. And it said email sent with message ID this. So it's fairly simple. Now you could see you have an entire server. I mean, no server actually. You don't have any server. You have stages, like you have production environment, you have dev environment, you have API gateway, you have APIs with all those REST API. You could also easily generate the documentation for your APIs using API gateway. You know, you could obviously monitor your APIs with things like how many calls and latencies and stuff. If you go to dashboard, now since I did one request in production environment, it should be here, which is like here that says that number of calls. We did 4 calls with few of the errors that was coming on, and there was latency was like 150 or 180 millisecond. So this is very simple for use and setup in case if you don't want to have your entire server, or if you have a DevOps teams who you can pay and stuff. Obviously you can go the other way, but this is very simple in order to start your own API for everything. And also you could download the documentation, which is again a big relief in that case. So that would be it for this tutorial. I almost cover all the parts of getting up and running and sending the things. The last thing that I need to show you is the mail that I just sent. Have I received it or not? If I go to inbox, yes, I just received that mail. So yeah, it could be a spam or something, but yeah, I received the mail. So you can even have this in your website where you have to send a contact us email. There's one thing that I missed. I'm not sure where that thing is, but if I go to usage plans, for some reason I'm not able to enable my usage plan. Otherwise I would have showed you the throttling, where you could do the API throttling. For example, if you want that, maybe you want 100 requests per day, not more than that. If you have a public API, that would be helpful. And then also you could set up your API keys here. You could create API key, for example, let's say uh, public key, maybe, if you want to, right? And you click save. So it will generate an API key for you. Then you could select which API you want to attach it to and which stage of that API. Now as soon as I attach it and click add, this key will become active for that stage, and now you have an authorized API which you could use for your purposes. So this actually serves all the purpose. Any type of API you want to create, it can create those APIs. And one thing that I missed to show is enable CORS. Let's say if you are doing a cross origin request, you could go ahead and enable CORS as well. So these are the few simple things. You could also, if you want to, if like this is the wildcard for all of them, but if you want to allow a couple of hosts, you could do that also and click enable CORS. If you do that, it will do a couple of things, and it will be, this API could be accessed from cross origin as well. So yes guys, this is the entire tutorial. Hope this helped you. I'll put everything in the description so that you could download things. Also, if you go to this blog I have written, you could read all of these things. Everything is explained in step-by-step process as in the video. You could also read it and get it from here. Okay guys, thank you so much.